Johnson, and this is my biology role model, Lisa Feldman Barrett. So, how did she become a scientist? She was the first in her family to go to university and also the first to get her PhD. She went to the University of Waterloo, I think, in Canada. She is Canadian also. So, while she was during her PhD, she was studying to become a clinical psychologist. While studying, she did one experiment 8 separate times, and each and every single time it failed. It was about emotion and depression and like sensing that based on how somebody looks. I think was what it was about. And she got really frustrated that it kept failing. But when she looked at her results, she noticed that it failed in the same way every single time. And this led her down the path of studying human emotion, which is what she does now. So now she is a distinguished professor in psychology at Northeastern University. She studies emotions in the brain and also the psychological aspect of emotions. So her hobbies, I couldn't really find too much about what she does in her spare time, but I did notice based on her work that she tends to focus on social justice. For example, in this TED Talk, she talks about the Boston Marathon bombing. One of the bombers seen in this picture has quite a stoic expression, and he held that expression during trial, and jurors thought that he looked cold and unremorseful, but she talks about how, according to her theory of emotion, that is more based on his culture than how he actually feels. She would also, I'd say, has a focus on advocacy and science education. She does a lot. She writes books. She does TED Talks and all of that. That seems like she's trying to get her theories out there and accessible to people of all education and of all backgrounds. So why I admire and identify with her, I want to be a neuroscience scientist eventually. I also really like psychology, so the fact that she's kind of both is inspiring to me. She's also an author. I really like to write, and I'm reading this book currently, and it's really good. I really recommend it. But she's done a lot in her field. She's come up with her own new theory, and I think that's really cool. She's also, if you're ever bored and want to spend a while on Wikipedia, you can look up all of her awards, and it's like a full page. So what is her field and focus? As I've mentioned, she really focuses on what causes emotion, both psychologically, neuroscientistically, I guess, in the sociology of that, as well as how language affects emotion. She calls all of this her theory of constructed emotion, which is basically that culture and experience creates the emotions we feel, while biology creates the stimulus. So she also has written quite a bit about sex-based differences in emotion, especially at that cultural level. This is another one of her books, by the way. It's called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. Her most recent paper was published in 2025. It focuses on that theory of constructed emotion. It's a little bit, this paper is kind of about how a different scientist is using her theory incorrectly. So the diagram at the top of this slide is kind of comparing how, I guess scientists would usually think like not logical, but the traditional way of thinking versus thinking like the exact opposite of that, like in a more sociology kind of way. And this is also a diagram from her paper. What has she uncovered so far? So she's really challenged the classical view of emotions, that biology is why we feel things, and it's like standard emotions. And she's changed that into more of biology is stimulus, and emotions are what we make of that stimulus. So she's also changed how the neuroscience of emotions are seen. They're plastic. You're not really born with everything that you will ever experience. You're born with some things, of course, like you can sense that your stomach is empty and you need to eat. That's why babies cry. Like, all that. There's also signaling in the brain that points to these things, but in the end, you control your emotions to a certain extent. And these are all the references I use. The ones highlighted are primary sources. So, thank you!